So after coming in contact with her writings, I want you to notice what they said about her ministry and also what they're saying about, just her work in general. I'm going to start with this man. His name is William Foxwell Albright, also known as the father of biblical archaeology. Notice what he says. William Foxwell Albright was an American and perhaps the world's famous archaeologist in the 20th century. He earned his PhD from Johns Hopkins University at the age of 25, and during the next 50 years he received 25 honorary doctorates from colleges, universities, and seminaries of Protestant, Roman Catholic, and Jewish faiths. He wrote more than 800 publications on archaeology, the Bible, and Eastern subjects. Now notice this. In the 1950s, one of his doctoral candidates at Johns Hopkins introduced Albright to Ellen White's writings. His curiosity piqued. The famous archaeologist undertook his own investigation of the life work and claims of Ellen White. And in his book, From the Stone Age to Christianity, Albright named Mrs. Ellen White as one of 5 individuals who he considered to be authentic prophets during the 250 years, rather the past 250 years. Alright, that's an amazing fact. Another individual, Florence B. Stratmeyer, who was one who did advanced curriculums for colleges. Notice this. Recently, the book Education by Ellen White has been brought to my attention. Written at the turn of the century, this volume was more than 50 years ahead of its times, and I was surprised to learn that it was written by a woman with but 3 years of schooling. The breadth and depth of its philosophy amazed me. Its concepts of balanced education, harmonious development, and of thinking and acting on principles are advanced educational concepts. The objective of restoring in man the image of God, the teaching of parental responsibility, and the emphasis on self-control in the child are ideals that the world desperately needs. Then she goes on to say, Mrs. White did not necessarily use current terms. In fact, she did not use the word curriculum in her writings. But the book Education in certain parts treats of important curriculum principles. She was concerned with the whole learner, the harmonious development of mental, physical, and spiritual powers. Today, many are stressing the development of the intellect, but feelings and emotional development are equally important. In our changing society, the ability to act on thought and in terms of principle is central. It is this harmonious development that is so greatly needed, yet so generally neglected today. And then she concludes by saying, I am not surprised that members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church hold the writings of Mrs. Ellen White in great respect and make them central in developing the educational program in their schools. Right? That's another amazing fact, and that's by somebody who wasn't even a Christian, but rather somebody who was in the secular curriculum activity. Okay, another professor from Japan actually said something about Miss Ellen White's writings on the book Education. I want you to notice what he also says. Just to quickly conclude, he says this. He called it most profitable reading in our understanding of the new education. Education, the book, written with the pen, or rather the inspired pen of Ellen G. White, has for 50-some years been a well-known book, which has rendered the greatest possible service and joy to students, teachers, and parents the world over. And then he concludes by saying, it is my sincere joy to hear that the book has been finally translated into the Japanese language. Wow. Now I'm going to show you this other one. This one's kind of funny, but notice what it says. The Minister of Education of a Southern European country had been studying at Teachers College, Columbia University. He came to the US for the best in educational policy and program of his newborn state. Upon his return to Southern Europe, he authored a work on religious and moral education. It was written in the Serbian language, published by the State University Press, and acclaimed by that institution as the best book on religious education in that language. Now notice this bit is funny. It says, when Adventist church leaders in Serbia read the work, they recognized it immediately. It was a translation of Ellen White's Education, with an introduction written by the Serbian Minister of Education. 80% of the new book came directly from Ellen White's pen. Friends, the man plagiarized Ellen White's writings. Anyway, moving on. This is a lot of information, so you may just want to pause. But anyway, I'm just gonna keep going. Now, this one was so interesting. It actually does link into what Naphtali said about, the prophets or the people putting Ellen White's writings. Whether the Spirit should have done that. But anyway, basically, notice what this German sociologist said. This is from Mrs. Simon. In 1965, a German sociologist, Mrs. I. Simon, published her doctoral dissertation in Münster, Westphalia. It dealt with Seventh-day Adventists and Ellen White. Now, she said, in part, she was without fear of men, courageous and consistent. She struggled within the movement to solve the many problems. She solved problems which the churches did not expect to see solved in many decades. Simon was unable to find adequate scientific explanation for Ellen White's visions and remarkable experiences. Then she says this. She held the opinion that had Ellen White been a Roman Catholic instead of a Seventh-day Adventist, she might very well be canonized in due course. Now, she says a lot more about her, so I'm just going to leave the link in the description box below, but I'm going to move on quickly. This is another man named Paul Harvey. Many of you have heard of him. Notice what he said about Ellen White. So, in 1960, Paul Harvey wrote this. Perhaps we should reread what she taught. The oil as eaten in the olive is far preferable to animal oil or fat. Today we know about cholesterol. She knew fine flour, white bread is lacking in nutritive element to be found in bread made from whole wheat. She wrote, do not eat largely of salt. Now we know we should keep the sodium intake low. We have come to accept the wisdom of such advice so completely that it is difficult for us to realize how revolutionary her theories were among a century ago. She urged pure air, sunlight, temperance, rest, and exercise. She wrote, tobacco is a slow, insidious, but most malignant poison. It is all the most dangerous because its effects are slow and at first hardly perceptible. Ellen White was indeed ahead of her time. Are there additional recommendations which this remarkable woman urged upon us, which we have so far ignored? Speaking about the times in which she lived, Paul Harvey adds, remember, this was in the days when doctors were still bloodletting and performing surgery with unwashed hands. This was in an era of medical ignorance bordering on barbarism. Now, I'm going to stop here, but upon request, if you want more information, I'll send it to you straight away. But you literally have even other endorsers, such as advocates of health. And I'm going to use this as my last one because I'm going to show you how enlightening this is, because it even comes up into today's society or today's generation. Now, many of you probably have heard of the documentary Forks Over Knives, which promotes absolute health in regards to what we put into our bodies, what we eat. And I've heard many testimonies from people who are not even connected to God, but have been highly impacted based upon the messages that this documentary has given. Now, one of the main doctors within the documentary, Dr. John McDougall, who specializes in disease prevention, he stated this in one of the news articles in 2013. He says this: there are only 2 people in my lifetime whose words of wisdom I always eagerly awaited, and one of them was Nathan Pritikin, who was born 1915 to 1985. And he says, during my final year of internal medicine residency at the University of Hawaii in 1978, I was given a set of audio tape lectures. I greatly regret his untimely death in 1985 at age 69. Then he says, as a close, the world would have been a better place if he had, if he had survived another decade or two. Now, I guess the question is then, who is Dr. Nathan Pritikin that Dr. John McDougall is just highly exalting? Nathan Pritikin was an American inventor, nutritionist, and longevity researcher. Now, Nathan Pritikin was interviewed about his research because it was quite similar to the messages Ellen White had on health. I want you to notice, this is interesting, I want you to notice what Nathan was actually saying when he was interviewed by some Adventists regarding the messages of Ellen White. Question: Mr. Pritikin, your ideas on nutrition and health are quite similar in many respects to those of Seventh-day Adventists. Are you aware of the Adventist health writings, many which are more than a century old? Answer: You mean the writings of Ellen White? Question: Yes, what we call our health message is largely based on her counsel. Answer: I have read all her books dealing with health topics. So the question was, would you care to comment on the concepts she presents, which we Adventists unfortunately have not observed as closely as we should? Answer: I feel that if you Adventists had followed the teachings in these books, you would be a much healthier group. Now that's a big rebuke. Then he goes, I think that the Adventist dietary plan is really very close to our nutritional recommendations. It was marvelous that this woman was able to write all that she did without any real scientific background. Then the question: of course, we believe she was inspired. Answer: she had to have been inspired. I don't know how she could have gotten this information herself. She certainly did a tremendous job for her time. Right. And then one last quote regarding what Nathan said. Nathan Pritikin of the Pritikin Diet said in 1979, I think that if you want to get to the originator of the proper diet, you have to go back to Ellen White. She laid the guidelines that unfortunately are not being adhered to as strictly as they should be.